So from here, I'm going to take this willow, and I want to do the next stage, which was, I know we said the outline first, but I want to go to this blurred. Let's try this one, or maybe this one. One of these blurred images. This one's pretty cool, but I don't see too much of the outline. So I'm going to try this one. And what I want to do here is really just try to capture a little tiny mapping before I get into my contour or negative space. Just a little mapping of those light, shadow, darker areas that I'm beginning to see here. And I'm remembering John Singer Sargent. Remember how he dealt with those lines in order to show the light and shadow? That's what I want you to, I don't want you to just color it in. I want you to just draw your lines and kind of map it. We're still mapping it. And there's, of course, we have this beautiful tail here happening. So as I think of basic shapes, next I moved to thinking of light and shadow and trying to really capture some of those shapes. That's all you're looking for. Simplified, just one step further than what you really originally had in terms of light and shadow. You're looking for the shape of those shadows, basically. You could lose for some shapes of light as well, but the thing with that, remember, as long as it doesn't get too confusing later on, I'm just adding a little. There's definitely some, and I don't want to add too much. Remember, once you feel you're starting to add detail, stop yourself. Nope, not yet. Detail shows up. You don't have to add it. It just comes together as you're just putting the pieces together. It just like a puzzle. It comes together. There we go. So mapping out the light. And I added a little extra. So I'm getting a little further ahead than where I want to be. Now I'm going to switch over to a charcoal pencil. So from my friendly willow here, nice and soft, to sketch it out. Now I'm going to go to more, let's call them defined lines. We're going to commit to some of these lines. I don't want to commit too much. I want to stay, again, in that stage of we're still from big to small, from simple to complex, and also from light to dark. So we're going from lighter to darker. So for this, I want you to see this. And I'm going to leave it up so you can actually really take hold of what should be those negative shapes. So with this here now, and this aid that shows you, this is what I need to be seeing, now I could actually work in a little bit better contour lines. What I'm looking for is that shape. Remember those shapes? So I want to put the word horse almost out of my mind. Right now I'm not drawing a horse. I'm drawing this little, call it like an elf hat. Do you see it? That happens right in here. And it's really pointy. And I don't have to name those things either. You don't have to see it. You just have to see how curved, how sharp, how pointy. But looking for those shapes outside of your subject and the angle of them, the size of them. The moment we begin to make up information, because we know, oh, this is where the head and the eye goes, and we could skip over and we can make what we would consider mistakes. And I don't say mistakes. It's just information that was not there that was looked over. And I call it more of a shortcut. We take shortcuts and we let our hand just draw whatever it wants, not the actual little shape that I'm seeing there. So I'm seeing this little rounder here, a little closer. Pull it down. Oh, here? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see okay? Perfect. So just to remind you, I'm using charcoal now, charcoal pencil, and I'm adding some of those lines that are still trying to maintain as soft as possible. So it may look like I'm doing a lot darker right now, but the truth is I'm trying to keep them as light as possible. I'm doing them a little darker so you guys could see a little easier, but you would want to be just one touch above the earlier lighter lines. So for example, here, you would want to go 1 degree darker. That's it. Because you're not committing to these lines. So compare this to this. You don't want to be here yet. You want to be somewhere over here. Now, like I said, I'm doing them making them a little darker. So you could see the shape of some of this negative space that I'm really focusing on. Take a little advantage since I'm here to just fill that in, see how it's looking overall. When you look at shadows within a figure, in a portrait, in an animal drawing, no matter what it is, studying light and shadows has got to be the most important thing in art. Because when you look at shadows, you absolutely have to read how much light is within that shadow. There are darker areas of dark. There's lighter areas of some of the shadow. So you have to make a good reading of it. And that is really what's going to take you to the next level. How you use light and shadow in your drawing. Once again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let's continue. Let's continue with the negative space drawing. So before I head down this way, and again, I don't want to rub my hand. I generally work from top left to bottom right. And it makes sense, right? If I work here and then I move over here, my hand's going to be rubbing all over this. It'll make a mess. So I'm going to go back to here and continue just what I'm seeing as negative space. So here's a little nice, I could make assumptions, corrections on what I had there before and what I'm seeing now and just make the adjustment. So it's not like what I had there before was perfect. It's not like what I'm putting now has to be perfect. It's a combination of what I saw first, what I'm doing now, combining a little bit of both and allowing it to, like I said, come together piece by piece. Really beautiful reading of negative space. And the way you do that, it's going to make everything you draw just so much better. Because when you see the shapes outside your subject, you're incorporating the space around it. And what most people don't realize, it's actually one of the most important things. Making sure we see both simultaneously. So when we catch ourselves thinking, for example, here, horse legs, just focus on simplified curve. How curve is it? How big is it? And minimize the information. Simplify it as much as possible. Now there's a little inner line here within that contour that obviously points at this leg coming here. I could go ahead and do that now. I could wait, come back later. But since I'm here, I'm going to add a little bit of that extra shadow that I see there, just because I was mapping out that light and I like how it looked. Just that little bit of muscle. There's more shadow right underneath here. And again, it's not adding detail. I'm thinking of John Singer Sargent. Remember, John Singer Sargent. Who is that? It's the artist I showed you earlier. And how he dealt with light and shadow. How some of those lines were just literally patterned in. And it was, a lot of it was just a parallel pattern, not a crosshatch even. Some of them, they just follow the direction of the muscle and they kind of curve following that. So notice it here, and here we get to that nice dark area that I saw earlier. I'm going to hatch it in there as I continue with my contour drawing. So this is really interesting because it almost looks like one straight line with a little tiny bump there. So these may be the hardest lines to draw when you have very subtle, soft curves. That's why portraits are so hard, because a lot of these lines, from the forehead or the edge, cheekbone, nose, those lines are so subtle, usually curves, and they shift from one section to another so quickly, but so subtle that it takes a really, really expert eye to catch the curvature and really interpret, transfer it, translate it to the paper. Sometimes we rush through them. Drawing a vertical, horizontal, diagonal, much easier. You see the angle. With these curves, there's so much nuance and shift that I recommend. It's another great exercise to practice those SC shapes, curve lines. Not to get distracted, continue with my contour. So here we have more of these subtle SC shapes, curves. You want to maybe think, oh, muscle. No, just think of form, size, angle. And if you have to stop, sometimes just stop. Look at it again, look at it, look at yours, look at it, look at yours, until you're, okay, comfortable with. Give it a couple of tests, lighter, little by little. Correct it as you need, and then boom, put it down. So little by little, I'm going to move this up so you can see the bottom here. We do the same thing. And here we have something nice, interesting, because we have a little bit of overlapping, it looks like, the legs, and we have nice little interior negative space. So this little beautiful shape here, I want to make sure I capture that at the right size. And I'm not worrying about anything else except the shape of this little space here. And with charcoal, sometimes it gets a little trickier because the lines that you need to be so sharp, if I'm working in a smaller scale, it's hard to put those exact lines detailed as you would wish. But I'm happy with that. And we continue with our outline. Perfect. Just looking at it, we know there's another shift over here with that leg overlapping. Just adding a little more light and shadow into some of these areas. Those nice cross lines. Like our friend John Singer Sargent. Here's another beautiful negative shape. Negative space pointing right at what you should be focused on. This little inner shape here. And there it is. It's amazing how it just comes together. So notice that this, as I look at it, see if it's curved enough, sharp enough, and in the right dimensions. Making sure this negative shape is going to actually be very important. That those are the things that make your drawings so much more powerful. How you handle space, negative space, value, which is the lights and shadows, and then color, of course, as long as it's in a nice composition of negative space, balanced, and in good values. Very simple rules that will guarantee your drawings to be very strong. So I feel like I might be adding some of that detail that I said don't. But just moving along, wanted to add a little bit of that dark that I see there. But yes, we continue. And here again, we have one of those very, very, I don't want to say tough, 'cause eventually they're not, but just making sure you read how the curves go in and out, whether they become an S or a C shape, and how much of a curve. So however much care you put into reading these types of subtle curves, you will get the payoff. If you just don't think about them too much and go right through it, that's fine. But you'll notice at the end, you'll notice that there's something feels off. Well, it usually could be something like that. And there's my outline. So that went pretty well. A little faster than I thought. Usually you want to take your time. You want to take sweet, nice, slow reading. It doesn't mean you have to draw slow. You could be, a little more gestural, but it's the observation of it that you really want to pay close attention to.